Welcome to the 3BA podcast, where bourbon, boners, and being awesome isn't just a catchy tagline. It's actually categories that we discuss different topics in every single day. My name's Garrett, and today I'm super excited to be with you to do our very first bourbon review. Now, as promised, I'm going to try to do some things a little bit differently than every other bourbon reviewer out there. You can get the notes, you can find the distiller's mash bill, you know who it's going to be distilled by, I'll tell you that. But ultimately what I want to give you is real life reaction. I want to tell you where I find it. I want to tell you where to get it. I want to tell you if it's worth anything right when you buy it versus if it's worth anything to hold on to. Is it rare? Is it sought after? Is it something you can trade with? All of those questions I think need to be answered. And I think that's what I'm going to bring to the table for you. Of course, we're going to drink some. Of course, I'm going to tell you if I like it or not. But ultimately, it's going to be up to you to decide if you want to try to buy it, try to purchase it, try to taste it. So with no further ado, I'm really excited to announce what the very first bourbon review is going to be. It's going to be something that caught me off guard, that started me on my bourbon adventure, and it's here with me today, and I'm proud to tell you about it. It is called Johnny Drum Private Stock. This Johnny Drum Private Stock is a Willett Distillery product. But interestingly enough, that's not where it started. As you can tell, it's got a nice fancy foil top. That didn't used to be the case. It's got this nice label that has no age statement. Also, this didn't used to be the case. I'm going to show you this bottle because this is the product you can find just about on every shelf down in Kentucky. You can find this bottle. It's a regularly released bottle of bourbon. It comes in a pretty whopping 50.5% alcohol, aka 101 proof. It drinks pretty hot. We're going to try it again anyways, but just to remind me, to show you, to give you a little bit of reaction. But the reason why I'm telling you that it didn't used to be this way is because there's a lot of interesting folklore and story behind Johnny Drum. I just so happen to have another bottle that's open, and as you can tell, this one has a waxed top. So just one of the minor details that has changed over the years after Willett had purchased the rights to, I guess you could say, the recipe and probably all of the barrels that used to be produced. Why do I say barrels? Why do I say the rights? Because if you look it up, I did a lot of research on this bottle before even talking to you today. And I come to find out that there's no real history on where Johnny Drum's recipe came from, if it was in fact distilled by someone other than Willett Distillery. But the reason why I'm going to tell you that I believe that it was, and that it's an interesting story that there is no information on, is because Willett doesn't produce two of the products that Johnny Drum used to. Johnny Drum used to produce a very low proof green label, a mid-tier black label, and then once every 6 months would release the private stock. So interestingly enough, the green label and the black label, which were on the bottom shelf of most liquor stores, have since disappeared. To find a bottle like that nowadays, this is what you want to hear. This is why you tune in. If you have a bottle of the green or the black label sealed with the plastic cap, it's worth a lot of money. What's a lot of money? Well, the green label sold for about $10.99. The black label was $12 to $13.99. I could not find one less than $150. Now, it's a significant increase in price for a very low alcohol-proofed product. Just so happens that I still have a little bit of my black label Johnny Drum left. Herein lies the reason why this is so interesting. We haven't even tasted anything. I haven't poured anything, but there is something to be said about this bottle, this recipe, and this brand. On the back of this black label, which I told you about, the one that you can't find anymore, it says distilled and bottled in Kentucky, USA by Johnny Drum Distilling Company. That's in Bardstown, Kentucky. So, back to what I originally pointed out. I can't find the history on where it was before. I can't find the history on where Willett bought the recipe or what happened to Johnny Drum Distillery. But what I can tell you is that Johnny Drum Distillery is nowhere to be found. I can also tell you that Willett took over distilling and barreling and bottling Johnny Drum labeled products, the mash bill and the recipe. Now let's get started. Let's do the fun part. Let's get to the tasting. Let me tell you about it. Let me tell you why this particular bottle holds a special place in my heart. And then I'll tell you what it tastes like, what I think goes best with it, how I handle it, and again, what I believe it should go with. Now, I'm not going to give you the tasting notes. There's so many people out there that do tasting notes. I'm going to give you my honest reaction to exactly what it tastes like. Now, as I'm pouring this, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, there's a story that goes along with Johnny Drum and me. When I first started my bourbon journey, way back, let's say 8 years ago or 9 years ago, I mentioned in a previous episode that I started by going to a bar and meeting the locals in Lexington, Kentucky. When I was in Lexington, I asked them, hey, of all of the bourbon that you can get here, what should I start drinking? A lot of them said the easy ones like Makers, and you can never go wrong with Jim Beam if you're going to mix it with something. Sorry, no offense to Jim Beam. But then this Johnny Drum came up. They're like, well, if you want to go to the store and you want to buy something that's not in every single bar, and it's on the bottom shelf, but still has a great mash bill and tastes fantastic, Johnny Drum is the way to go. So, me being very novice in my bourbon career, I'm only going to do a little bit of this black label because there's so little of it left and it is expensive to find. But being very novice in my bourbon tasting career, I said, okay, I'm going to go try it. I went to the store, sure enough, bottom shelf, green and black label. Now, nobody said which one to get. No one told me which one tasted better. They just said, go try Johnny Drum. Lo and behold, looking on the bottom shelf, grabbing the black and the green label, there happened to be a worker. It was at a place called Liquor Barn, if anybody's familiar. I don't have any connection to them or promotion for them. I'm going to tell you exactly where it was. It was at the Liquor Barn in Lexington, Kentucky. There's quite a few, but there is one that most people go to. I'm in the Liquor Barn. I'm looking on the bottom shelf. I see the Johnny Drum. I go to grab one, and one of the workers is walking down the aisle. He sees me. He goes, oh, good choice. How long have you lived in Lexington? And I jokingly said I just moved here, and I was referred to coming here and buying this particular bottle. It was recommended to me. He said, well, it just so happens to be your lucky day. He goes, I need you to look up top here. Look on this shelf. Look up high. And sure enough, up on the top shelf, it wasn't this bottle, obviously. I've had a few of these. But there was this private stock. And I go, oh my gosh, what's that? And he told me it is one of their releases that they do every 6 months. It's not a brand that comes out often. The lower shelf, the green and the black labels are the ones that everybody goes after. They're really low proof, but this private stock comes out. It is fantastic. So sure enough, I said, okay, I'm new. I don't know what this is. I'm going to grab it. So sure enough, that's what I did. Here we are today. Fast forward, I'm getting to do a bourbon review with you about it. I'm starting with the black label. I also tried that one, bought that bottle as well. Did not buy the green label, but decided to grab the black. So here we go. Here's the black. The Johnny Drum black label, which is delicious, is discontinued. I don't know why they discontinued it, but it is a great product. I never got to try the green label. I'm kicking myself now that I should have grabbed it before it was discontinued by Heaven Hill. I would have bought a case of both. I tell everybody that I've ever met, this is exactly what you like in a low-proof product, which leads me to today's bourbon reviewed bourbon, and that is the Johnny Drum Private Stock. So the private stock, as I had mentioned earlier, it's 101 proof. It was formerly through Johnny Drum Distillery. Willett now barrels it and ages it and bottles it, and they bottle it in this new kind of copper foil top. A lot of people ask, does it taste different? I don't think it does. I believe that they've stayed true to the recipe and to the pour and to the bottling. They've definitely stayed true to the proof. For me, it's still a great product, and it's one of those products for for the dollar, for the bang for the buck at $59.99, if you can still find it there. It's a great pour. That pour right now still goes, you can still find the bottle everywhere at Heaven Hill. There's not going to be a shortage of the private stock, barrel on the shelves. But it's not easily found in Ohio. It's primarily a Kentucky product. Again, they have it on their shelves everywhere around Kentucky. It's not crossed the Ohio River up north. It's still, I think, a Kentucky primarily only product. Again, if you visit Willett Distillery, you're always going to have the option to buy it. Now, for me, at a 50.5% alcohol volume, it's a pretty hot pour. Now, something you don't know about me, since this is the very first bourbon review, I'm going to try every bourbon you see without a cube in it. Now, I also, something you're going to learn about me over the time that I do this, is I am an ice cube snob. Probably not what you thought I was going to say, but I am. I spent way too much money to get crystal clear ice. Now, in a later podcast, we're going to talk about the ice and why I think crystal clear ice is better. A lot of people out there who drink bourbon are going to look at me and be very upset because I dilute it, but it's better for me than sprinkling some water into it or adding a drop of water. I personally like my bourbon chilled. But as I just said, every pour that I do, every tasting I do, everything that you're going to see on this podcast, I will do neat first, and then I'll probably add a cube later. So, with no further ado, cheers to anybody who has bourbon out there. There's a few people down here watching me right now. Cheers to all of you. Here's some bourbon. Sorry for those people listening. I was just swishing around in my mouth. Burn. I'm not going to talk about flavors. You can get flavors from anybody. A rule with me. What I taste, what I get, does not necessarily mean that's what you're going to taste and you're going to get. I'm not knocking what everybody does on their podcast when they do tastings and they give notes. I'm just not going to be that guy. I'm going to tell you if I like it or I don't like it. Would I buy it again, or would I let it sit for somebody else? Would I pay secondary for it, or would I just be glad that I have it and give it to other people? To answer all of those questions right off the bat, yes, I like it. I actually love it. Yes, I would buy it again. And if it ever went to a secondary price, I would absolutely buy it. If I knew it was going to be discontinued, I would definitely invest in Johnny Drum, if I were you. But they're going to make that product for a long time. It's great. It hits you right in the teeth. It's a pleasant burn. We're not going to go, like I said, I'm not going to go into vanillas or caramels or any of that nature. I'm just going to tell you that if you're looking for a adequately priced bourbon that's going to punch above its weight class, this is exactly it. Johnny Drum, private stock, that's the one you got to look for. It's got this copper wax top, or now it's got this kind of off gold coppery foil. And I just realized, and this is something that I'm doing on the fly, I realized they're in different bottles now. I'm going to hold those up. I didn't realize that they changed bottles, call that a bottle or a glass shortage or whatever you want to call it, but it's definitely something different. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put some ice in it. And then I got one more story for you before I finish up this last review here. My story about Johnny Drum Private Stock is simply this. At one time, we had a poker game. I enjoy gambling. I enjoy playing poker with my friends. I had somebody who I really, really respect in the bourbon community. He came over, he was sitting in my basement, we were playing cards, and he knew I was into bourbon. He actually got me into a lot of different bourbon groups. Again, for another podcast, we'll talk about bourbon groups. While we were sitting here, he said, "Hey, I'd love to try anything new that you might have, something that I haven't tried." I said, "You know what? I got something for you. It's called Johnny Drum. Have you ever heard of it?" He said, "No, where's it distilled?" As you've been told throughout this whole review, the review, it started at Johnny Drum Distillery, and it's now over at Willett, but it was in Bardstown. I told him I was distilled in Kentucky. Give it a try. Again, I've told him everything that I'm telling you. It punches above its weight class. It's higher alcohol volume. He goes, "Okay, great." Again, now this gentleman is way more seasoned than me. I'll give him all the credit in the world. Hopefully he'll come on sometime. I'm going to leave out his name for the time being. But at that point in time, I gave him a pour, and my proud bourbon moment early on in my bourbon career, if you want to call it that, was the look on his face when he took his first sip of Johnny Drum Private Stock. He couldn't believe it. He goes, "Garrett, I've been to Kentucky many times. I've never heard of this product. What is it?" I said, "Well, this is a local recommendation. They have lower vintages, like I said, the green and the black label. I said, but this private stock, you're gonna still be able to find it. From that point on, this gentleman who has been in bourbon for longer than I have, longer than I could even think to have been, ends up telling me and sending me pictures how he went and found sealed bottles of the black label and the green label and the early releases of the copper wax top label. Couldn't believe it. He just went crazy over it. That, in turn, to tell you a little bit more about my story, which we'll tell at a later time, that got me into some places that I have never been before. I got contacts with people that I probably shouldn't have been able to get contacts with. I got into stores that I probably shouldn't have got into. All because I gave the right pour to the right guy at the right time. Right place, right time, you get it. But it's a great story. I can elaborate more on another time. He's a really good friend of mine to this day. We drink a lot of bourbon together. Again, there's many stories that I could tell about him and the bourbons that he's gotten, that he got me to try. But ultimately, at the end of the day, where I want to go with this is, if you try something new that you've never tried before and you don't like it, always let it age, let it sit, let it air out. You hear that from all the professionals. So I'm going to tell you that as well. Any bourbon you see me review on here, I'm going to give you the thumbs up. Again, I'm going to give you my, would I buy it again? Would I buy it on the secondary? I'm going to give you all those notes that I like to give and I think pertinent information for you to have. And then additionally, I'm going to tell you, if you don't like it right away, always give it a try. Most importantly, here at the end of the day, on this first bourbon review, I'm going to tell you one thing. Enjoy your bourbon how you like it. If you like it with a cube, if you like it with a splash of water, if you like it neat, I don't care how you drink it. As long as you're drinking Kentucky bourbon, I'm going to be happy. You're going to be happy. And the people in Kentucky who distill that spirit, they're going to be happy for you too. So with that, I'm going to finish this up right now with you. Cheers. Enjoy whatever pour you're having tonight. I have some people that I'm going to pour some bourbon for. And down the road, if we ever want to give away samples, please feel free, reach out, shoot us a message. We'll make sure that we get some sample bottles. That's going to be coming down the road. But for the first one, I'm excited to tell you, Johnny Jump Private Stock, have a great night.